Facebook's on. It's getting there. Facebook, we're on
Sweet.
Periscope. We're on YouTube. Are we on LinkedIn? I don't know. Oh, well, it says you're online, so maybe.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I just got
Oh,
a notification.
there we go.
All
Cool.
right, cool. Well, I
Looks
don't know
like
about mine, but it doesn't matter. I'm live everywhere else, so
sweet.
I updated you, so we're good to go.
Cool, cool, cool. All right. Well, round two
Round
for
two.
the weekly fireside chats, talking all things conversational AI, chatbots, voice, trends that are sort of emerging insights. So hopefully this stream will be a little smoother this week. I know last week we had a couple hiccups, but par for the course, as they say, especially with live streaming. So we'll wait a couple of minutes before we sort of start rolling here. But for everyone that's joined so far, my name is Chad Oda. My co-host is Tyler Odenthal. And we'll be chatting your guys' ear off about chatbots, Microsoft Teams, show you guys some demos today. Certainly, if you have questions, feedback, would love to have you guys participate, and we'll be sure to engage. So we will just wait a couple minutes here before we start trucking.
Yep. Looks like we got one reaction so far, maybe two. So people are starting to come in.
Cool, cool, cool. Yeah, I mean, I'm super stoked with just the LinkedIn Live experience so far. It's been really good. It's I'm sort of waiting for them to like launch their own application though.
Yeah, that'd be super cool. It'd be nice to have like a little LinkedIn uh, dashboard that you can just stream to and get little chat notifications. Currently, it's a little bit disjointed, but it is what it is.
Totally. Yeah. It'll be interesting, what sort of emerges, by way of the live stream and also the fact that, I mean, since Microsoft owns LinkedIn now, we're beginning to see these reverberations inside the platform itself. If you look at the messaging and inbox
For
functionality,
sure.
where
Like the
they're,
suggestions, and
yep.
they're getting pretty smart on those.
So they're totally training their own models right now on, you know, whatever sort of B2B or LinkedIn messaging language models they can train on. So who knows if they launch chatbots on LinkedIn, maybe. I could see them maybe rolling out like a segmented rollout just for LinkedIn pages. I
Hmm.
think might be something interesting, but it doesn't really seem like they're really prioritizing the pages in the algorithm right now on LinkedIn.
Yeah, not really. I think I've started to see suggestions on posts.
Mm-hmm.
Like essentially, people will make a post. Oh yeah, it was the work. So like whenever anyone joins like a new company, like the little work notification
Yep.
goes out. Like they now have suggestions on the bottom of that. And it was like, oh, congratulations. It had like a little celebration emoji and like so yeah, they're starting to integrate it in places, but I don't know if the end goal is necessarily bots on LinkedIn. That'd be interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree with that.
I
I
mean, they
mean,
could probably integrate it into their education like section a little bit,
mm-hmm.
like better FAQs, better education responses. So like live feedback on like when people are watching a video for education purposes. Maybe like if they have a question, they can like type it in, get a response. That'd be kind of cool.
Totally, totally. So I guess just circling back real quick for everyone joining us, welcome. This is our second weekly fireside chat, talking all things chatbots, voice, AI. Um, Hopefully, a few less technical difficulties than last week. If you guys are joining us for the first time, my name is Chad Oda, and my co-host here is Tyler Odenthal. And essentially, today we'll be talking about three major things. We'll go for about like an hour and a half. Firstly, we're just going to talk about general trends in the conversational AI ecosystem that we're seeing. Secondly, super excited to talk about a lot of really cool stuff within the Microsoft ecosystem right now pertaining to Bot Framework, Composer, Microsoft Teams. So we'll be talking about some of those opportunities and how they're sort of evolving. And then finally, Tyler is going to walk us through some pretty cool demos that we've been working on lately, just tinkering around the platform, seeing what new sort of integrations we can make. super exciting stuff. So certainly over the course of this live stream, if you guys have questions or feedback, feel free to throw them in the live chat and we'll be sure to be engaging here. So I think we'll wait until 12:05 and then we will start kicking this thing off.
Sounds good. Nice. Looks like there's not any big technical hiccup. I don't think my LinkedIn went live, but that's fine. That's for another day.
For another day, for sure. It looks like we have like 13 people in here. So yeah, super excited. Feel free to drop us like what's your sort of interest in the fields or what companies you're working for. Would love to sort of get a better understanding of who's all watching the chat today, just so we can make sure that we could sort of cater the content and insights to things that you guys are going to find interesting and sort of aligned to the stuff you guys are working on.
Yeah, definitely. I know that conversational AI differentiates from region to region. Like China has their own use cases. Europe seems to be doing their own thing, and the United States is seeming to prioritize different channels as well. So it's nice to get a little bit of background from all sections of the world. I think that's how you get a better understanding of what's going on in the space.
Absolutely. And it's 12:05, so why don't we kick things off? And I think, Tyler, that's a really good segue into, just talking about overall trends. From where you sit, Tyler, what are some overall trends just within broadly the conversational AI ecosystem? We could talk about chatbots, voice, multimodality, even computer vision with, digital avatars integrated.
Yeah,
What do you
yeah,
see right now?
yeah. I think Asia is actually kind of leading the charge in this space. I think they have a lot of applications that far exceed the United States and even Europe. Like partnering conversational systems with vision AI systems. I went over to Shenzhen, China, a couple times when I was doing my last company to develop a product. And WeChat, as you're walking around, gives you hotspots, and like as you walk past a restaurant, it pings you, like, "Hey, our restaurant has a discount going on." And then when you walk into the restaurant, there's Vision AI that actually registers your face, your avatar on your WeChat with the restaurant's menu system. So, like, imagine in the United States walking into a restaurant nowadays, and before you even order, they already know like what you ordered last time, what your favorite food is, um, like your estimated price range, all sorts of things. So I think uh, conversational AI and vision AI in general has a long way to go. But if we want to see the future, we should probably look towards what China and Asia is doing, because that's where I've gotten my most insights personally.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And for everyone joining the stream, Carol, Carl, Chris, Clint, welcome. Certainly looking forward to you guys engaging. Feel free to shoot questions out or give us your perspective. It's always nice to sort of hear how other people are seeing the space as well. So sort of back to your question, or I mean back to your sort of insight, Tyler. Yeah, I totally agree. I think for countries that had the benefit of jumping directly to, mobile first, I think certainly are places where I think we're going to be seeing some innovation getting pushed a little bit further sooner. I think especially if we look at China's sort of overall adoption of OTT messaging in comparison to the United States, their country has been very, very, and Asia as a whole has been very, very mobile messaging centric, which I think has sort of led to the evolution of a lot more chat interfaces, mobile first social networks such as WeChat, which you were sort of mentioning. I think that is a really interesting sort of trend to track, especially when we look at the previous Facebook F8 conference in 2019. And this is something you were mentioning last time, Tyler, that Zuckerberg is certainly paying attention to WeChat, both from a monetization perspective and from a messaging perspective. What do you sort of see with where Zuckerberg might be trying to go and with what WeChat is doing today?
Yeah, definitely. I think Facebook has a great lead on the e-commerce space for conversational AI, just because of their demographic and the use cases that they're trying to promote. Um, they if their model holds true, I would say that they're trying to copy what WeChat's doing in China in the most appropriate way in America. Um, so things like that location tracking services and like having a restaurant being able to ping you when you're close in a vicinity, um, knowing mobile orders. They're doing more types of Shopify integrations. So they're really trying to corner this e-commerce space. And I think that's what WeChat really specializes. You can do all sorts of orders like clean your dog. You can have house cleaning service ordered from it. But also, like I was saying, restaurants are also integrated into it. Um, so I think where Facebook is heading is more of an commerce centric focus in the conversational space, which leads other channels for other opportunities other than e-commerce.
Yeah, totally. And I see Carl here is also making the point that Mark Zuckerberg certainly is also, being conscious of the fact that privacy is sort of paramount to his platform success as well. So I certainly think, although China's model with WeChat certainly is aligned to, I think, you know, the way that they can sort of integrate into all these different data sources sort of at will. I certainly think it sounds like Mark is going to be taking potentially a more reserved approach, but I think we can say that he certainly has a vision of integrating all of the current Facebook channels, which he had mentioned in F8 last year, so that you could have this sort of ubiquitous of interoperable messaging experience between Instagram and Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp. So I
Yeah,
think it'll be interesting, like how bots potentially get facilitated over that, um, and certainly something to look at. And then I think the other thing to look at too is voice smart speaker adoption and the companies, and what is the market distribution in China when it comes to voice. And Tyler, I remember you were mentioning that the voice interaction models seem to be a little bit more complex, and I think it's probably one of the reasons is the fact that Chinese as a language is just much more complex. But also, I think culturally, how they interact with smart speakers is definitely different, more sort of relationship based. If you don't mind, I guess sharing that one example you were telling
yeah,
me.
no. I think you're segueing me great into that example. When I was in Singapore, my taxi driver, which was also a business concierge type representative, was taking us to the mall to go to one of like these nice restaurants, and essentially he was giving directions to his phone in Tagalog or Singapore native language, and then he would switch back to English and talk to us in the same phrase, essentially in the same conversation, and you could see the phone reading the conversation as it transitioned from Tagalog to English, and it cut off at when it knew that we transitioned to English, which I find that to be extremely impressive. And I think how they did that was out of necessity because you have a lot of like Spanglish, like Spanish and English. These types of dynamic uh, integrations of languages that happen in other cultures don't necessarily happen in the United States. So I think they've had to make more robust NLP and NLU systems just out of necessity. And these interesting use cases that they've uh, figured out, like cutting off language sample when it transition, uh, is insanely powerful. I find it really cool.
Yeah, certainly. I think, that degree of like multi-turn dialogue plus just like the, you know, I guess language awareness of their voice models and how like all the backend logic is being computed certainly I think is more advanced than sort of the single turn interactions we're seeing today. With things such as Cortana or you know Amazon Alexa, Google Assistant. So it's certainly interesting to look at those different parallels. And then similarly, I had just spoken with someone that is very integrated in the Chinese voice ecosystem. And he had essentially mentioned to me that if we look at the top sort of technology incumbents, Alibaba really owns the conversational commerce space, right? So we could sort of begin to draw parallels to what Amazon is trying to achieve with Amazon Alexa. And then there also is, from what I understand, Xiaomi is actually the top smart speaker with IoT integrations today. And then Baidu, from all accounts, is one of the most advanced smart assistant that has been deployed. So perhaps like we can make the parallel to something like what Google is trying to do with just their capabilities with their knowledge graph is much more robust than say Amazon's, which I've been seeing they're trying to actually crowdsource their knowledge graph. And then appreciate the comment, Carol. So he's essentially asking, it seems like Facebook is beginning to mobilize efforts around their portal. But they've been pretty mum about that recently. I do know that in their innovations department, they are sort of retooling stuff and building some things. Um, I think Facebook is going to try to corner the sort of, you know, the same audience they appeal to today on Facebook, but I think they're going at it from like a unified communications front. If you've recently seen that Facebook has rolled out sort of like a web camera that's integrated into your TV to talk to your friends and family.
Wow.
But I don't know. What do you think about that, Tyler?
Yeah, no, I personally haven't heard a lot from Facebook Portal. I know that they had the little type of Amazon Alexa type system that had the screen and you could talk to it. But other than that, I don't know much about what they're doing over there. I do know that they are starting to ramp up their conversational AI and voice AI team because I recently got reached out by that team. So I know that they're hiring and they're probably starting to do more things with it, but I'm not very knowledgeable in that space.
For sure. Yeah. And I mean, I think that might be by design. They have been pretty tight lipped about, you know, things coming out of there. But I mean, on the other side of things, it seems like Facebook research has been putting out a lot of interesting research papers around dialogue management, about NLU models, transformers. So certainly, they are really beginning to build out their core competencies around the underlying technologies. So that's certainly for sure. So I guess it will be a matter of time before we see what sort of results of those things.
Hmm. Carl mentioned something pretty interesting actually with the Libra currency that they're trying
Mm,
to push out. It seems that Baidu and Alibaba and Tencent are backing the basic attention token, which I didn't know about. Um, that's actually something that's because if Baidu and them's already backing the basic attention token and Facebook's long term play with conversational AI and commerce is going to be this Libra coin, I think uh, I don't know. I don't know if Facebook is going to be able to compete with Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent for the cryptocurrency e-commerce space.
Yeah, that is very interesting. I guess we haven't really seen a lot of direct competition on product or service lines when it comes between China and the US as far as like digital market share, or at least I can't a lot of really good examples. So perhaps that might be the first like, salvos into some sort of, direct competition between Chinese and, American technology incumbents on a very like sort of direct, market share competition. So I think certainly that will be interesting. And to your point about Libra, with what Facebook is rolling out, and this is a conversation you and I had, I think a couple of days ago. It's like Facebook, their entire business model is effectively an advertisement platform. And, I think that model works really well with traditional, ad units for websites and social media. But I think what they're finding is with their user bases, increased adoption of their messaging channels. Since I think about 2012, their messaging adoption has eclipsed monthly active users for the actual traditional mobile app or Facebook on the website
For
platform.
sure.
And I think what they're finding is that there's difficulties in creating ad units that work effectively with messaging, because you have to balance, is it, they certainly have a dilemma where they're trying to balance, increased insights to their advertisers while at the same time trying to limit and mitigate the level of intrusiveness, on a one-to-one conversation to someone on Messenger. So I think, looking at Libra, there's certainly some reverberations and parallels to what WeChat has essentially accomplished because WeChat, makes money off of payment processing,
Yeah, and
right?
it seems like they have pretty much everything inside that one app. They got messaging, they got e-commerce, they got like line of business all inside of it.
Hmm.
So like uh I think what Facebook's really trying to accomplish with their messaging platform is not to intrude upon the conversations that people are having, but to find a way to sell products in there, because the biggest use cases that are actually being successful on Messenger, I feel, and what I've seen, is e-commerce solutions. So like makeup bots, clothing bots. Um, I have a friend who sells uh, energy drinks on Messenger. So I feel like, uh, while they've had mixed success on selling ad space inside of the Messenger platform. I think they might be able to do something with this type of commerce concept.
Totally agree with that. And I think it's an interesting balancing act that they have to certainly play. And I don't think there are really any easy solutions around that. And then similarly, we look at conversational commerce on voice, and there, are different, issues, and higher degrees of complexity when you just try to transact over voice.
For sure.
Discoverability, obviously one. Another one being not everyone has a screen. So some, commerce related activities are quite difficult sometimes. But I think we're certainly seeing some slow advances there. You know, I think if everyone was to have a smart speaker with a visual display or if I think, Amazon were to improve their mobile application to work in conjunction with their voice speaker, I
Mhm.
think we potentially begin to see, much better returns for conversational commerce per se. But, I think certainly those things are a bit nascent right now as far as, do they work at all scales of different organizations? Because, having spoken to, Rain Agency, which is pretty much the top voice agency in the US, just by function of the type of clients they work with, Fortune 50, Fortune 500. Nike can go out and Nike can spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on literally just a customer activation campaign, right? Where they make one specific voice skill that enables people to get a limited edition shoe and run a advertisement on TV during an NBA game, and that works for them, right? But that
For
doesn't
sure.
necessarily scale to what a mid-market company or even a small business would be able to achieve.
Sure.
So I think that's certainly a moving target. I think when we look at China, Baidu has certainly made some pretty significant gains with conversational commerce. They actually had sold, millions of dollars of worth of product. I think during their, um, I think they have like a specific, it's like a specific commerce day in China called 1111 or something like that. Don't
Interesting.
quote me. And
Yeah.
Baidu apparently had sold a lot of different things on their voice speaker, but I think their voice speaker has like a display integrated. So,
Yeah.
certainly don't quote me, but I think it'll be interesting looking
Yeah.
who's moving the needle on this.
Yeah. I think back to your point, like the voice speaker alone might not be enough for an e-commerce solution, but pairing that with something visual like a screen or sending it to your phone, um, might be the best solution. I would also have to look more into how they operated on that Baidu uh, e-commerce promotion, because that's interesting. Well, if they didn't have a screen, that's really impressive. If they did have a screen, then like I think you could see parallels like that happening in the United States. So bringing it back to the United States, we kind of know what Facebook's doing. They kind of have like this e-commerce edge. Do you think Amazon's also going the e-commerce route? What's Microsoft doing? What are the other ones in the United States doing at the moment?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I certainly think Amazon, they're very much positioned to take advantage of that, you know, retail, e-commerce, totally, selling products is the name of the game for them. So whatever amplifies that, is right up their alley. And I think we're seeing them continually make improvements along this, continuum. So I think the parallel is Baidu to Amazon as far as what their
Okay.
focus will be with voice. As far as Google, I think you could make more parallels with Google with a combination of Xiaomi and with Xiaomi and I'm gonna have to look this up real quick because I can't remember the name. Xiaomi and Baidu. I'm sorry. The parallel for Amazon in China is not Baidu. It is Alibaba. So because Alibaba is sort of the conglomerate sort of e-commerce platform that Amazon is. So
Yeah, yeah.
Amazon to Alibaba, Baidu plus Xiaomi to Google. And the reason why I say that is because Google is certainly, it seems like they're bringing under the fold the advanced capabilities because I would say their voice assistant is probably the most mature in doing a lot of broad things, just by function of the knowledge graph that they've been leveraging from a lot of the data they aggregated over search, over
Yeah.
voice, multiple different categories over the last several years. And as a result of that, not only are they positioned with that capability from a usability perspective, but also they're really trying to drive home this concept of you know connected devices, right? You see Google Home has sort of pulled the smart speaker under the fold of that sort of ecosystem. So in a similar perspective, Xiaomi is pushing the boundaries with IoT and connected devices with their smart speaker. So Google certainly is going to begin broaching this notion um, of ambient computing quite heavily. Now, when we look at Microsoft, and this is an area that I think you and I are really excited about,
Definitely.
they're certainly going to own a significant market share with internal facing voice applications. We've seen Cortana for Business, sort of hinted at. We've seen features deprecated. Currently, it's in a private sort of access, developer access. Not exactly sure what will result from that, but I think we can make some informed, educated guesses around what that might look like. And from what I see, Samsung is also, I think, trying to make some similar plays in that area, but also pushing the boundaries with sort of connected devices as well. I don't know as much about Samsung. I do have a couple contacts that I've been talking to there. Surprisingly enough, they also have their own chatbot platform as well that I didn't really even understand, didn't know that until maybe a couple months ago. Um, and to that point, Stephen, thank you for the introduction to that contact at Samsung. Um, but that being said, let's perhaps now sort of talk about some like line of business related use cases and trends, because I think that's an area that we sort of want to focus on today. So I think dovetailing from what I mentioned about Cortana. So back in 2019, Microsoft put out a tech demo, and the tech demo was sort of the vision for their Microsoft voice assistant. Essentially, it was, what does Cortana look like when it's integrated into the entire ecosystem of Microsoft 365 applications? And what does that sort of workflow look like? And I think that did a really good job of painting the picture and helping us understand why Microsoft is doing certain things today within the bot framework ecosystem, with Power Virtual Agents, with some of the dynamic cards they're doing. So I think that's a really interesting area. What do you think about that, Tyler? Where do you see that going?
Yeah, I mean, I was for a long time, a very big believer in Dialogflow. I still think Dialogflow has great use case application. But the moment I went over to uh, the Microsoft side, essentially, I realized that they have a lot of integration that I do know about. And I think that's kind of dovetailing off of the Dynamics 365 platform that they developed. They had all these integrations with email that could go to like spreadsheets and stuff. But once when they started to expand that out into a thing called Power Virtual Agents, and then partnering that with their bot framework Composer, uh, you have conversational AI that can now access integrations in a flow system. So what that means is you can have a request that does dynamic things. So you can send a photo to your bot. Your bot can now know that it was sent a photo. It will now integrate with a vision AI. It'll analyze that photo. It'll now send that to a Google spreadsheet, and then it also can send back that reply in a conversational or voice form. So I think, and then once when you partner that with IoT devices, I think Microsoft has a huge edge with where they're going and what they can possibly start to do. And I see that Carl is actually saying that he uses Microsoft for his blockchain and IoT devices, which I could totally see that being a thing. Like having these conversational systems alongside IoT devices that transact blockchain type requests. That's definitely something that you can do in Microsoft. While I wasn't even thinking of those types of use case applications while I was using Dialogflow. I was really stuck into the mindset of conversational space. But now I feel like where Microsoft is showing is that the conversational space can actually access a lot of other things. So conversational is now not just say like reply and answer. It is now reply, go get some data, send that data back, analyze this thing, and then like interpret for me and get me educated data back. Which I think is kind of the next step where conversational AI is going, which is kind of where you alluded to is this kind of like ambient computing system, um, which I think Microsoft, out of all of them that I've seen in the United States, is uh, definitely taking that stance the hardest in their documentation and what they're showing. So that's exciting. I find that extremely exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And for everyone not totally familiar with some of these platforms, so Tyler was referencing Dialogflow, which is developed by Google. It's sort of their sort of end-to-end platform for developing bots. You can have everything from, the NOU to the dialogue management to fulfillment to, custom backends all in that platform. Similarly, making the comparison to, you know, Microsoft Bot Framework with bot services, Lewis, and that sort of similar stack. I certainly agree. I think specifically around line of business, there's often a lot of talk about conversational AI chatbots oriented towards the consumer-facing applications like retail and e-commerce and entertainment chatbots for musicians and general FAQs, but I don't think there's been as much focus on internal use cases for organizations, such as knowledge management, ITSM, HR help desk, just scheduling a meeting or resetting a password. So I think there's significant potential. And I think what Tyler's making the point of is the fact that looking across the spectrum of vendors, who's best positioned to take advantage of that opportunity? And we certainly strongly believe Microsoft, out of all the other vendors. I think IBM and Oracle certainly are trying to address similar things at this point.
Yeah,
But I think they just don't have the same. I mean, I think to a certain extent they do have access to some of these backend
I do too.
applications inside their ecosystem, but Microsoft certainly, I think, has taken a cake here, at least in my humble opinion. So if you look at the Microsoft stack today, right, when it comes to chatbots, and Tyler, feel free to jump in here. At the base level, they have cognitive services, right? So any of sort of the standalone, AI cognitive oriented services that you can call exist at that level, right? So if you're looking at sort of like text analysis or, even a little bit higher up the spectrum with Microsoft Lewis with their NLU capabilities or computer vision or data analysis capabilities, that sort of lives in the cognitive layer at the base level of the pyramid, so to speak, right? Now, one layer up, we have some architecture around that specifically for conversational AI with Microsoft Bot Framework, very flexible tool to structure and manage dialogues. And actually, an abstraction higher than that, which they've released in a developer preview, is Composer, which is finally adding sort of a graphical user interface to augment the development of bots on Microsoft Bot Framework. So we've been super excited about that. And then another layer above that, which Tyler was mentioning, is okay, let's say we build a bot. How do we now integrate it into the ecosystem of Microsoft applications in 365? Well, we have Power Apps, which effectively have built a lot of those different integrations out and allows us to string those things together in specific workflows. And now we can tie those back to Microsoft Bot Framework and any of the bots we create there. But the exciting thing that we'll show some demos today, we'll talk about it, is what Microsoft is calling Power Virtual Agents. So, Power Virtual Agents essentially is the highest degree of abstraction when it comes to making chatbot building for internal line of business use cases simple. So what they've done is they've sort of packaged together, it's pretty compartmentalized, packaged together a chatbot builder, which enables access to Power Apps integrations. So you can make relatively robust chatbots, internal facing, deploy them on Teams, on Messenger, really wherever you want to deploy them, even over voice with Cortana. In a very simple and easy to use package. So they just recently rolled that out, maybe 3-4 months ago, in an official capacity. So it's certainly really interesting how Microsoft is not only making it easier to build bots for the enterprise, but also providing the backend integrations readily accessible. So super excited about that stuff.
Yeah, yeah, I am too. I only recently learned about Composer about a couple weeks ago, but I've used it. Uh, it's beautiful. You can design. Their interface allows you to design flowcharts for bots that I've never seen before. They've really thought it through with making it the experience really nice for developer and making it not hard to code complex systems. Which I think is where the power of PVA lies, is simpling down these complex systems and integrations into an easy visual thing to understand that almost anyone can program bots now. A layer below that, which I mainly operate in, is called Composer. Now, Composer is pretty much the same thing, but it doesn't have as pretty as graphical user interface. It's essentially the step it's what they developed before they built PVA. And the only reason why I'm still bullish about Composer at the moment is because they have a thing called adaptive cards, whereas currently PVA does not have access to for another 3 to 4 months. It's on their timeline. They really want to add it, but it's not there yet. And I think the moment that they add adaptive cards to their PVA ecosystem, um, they will start to dominate the space. I don't think you will see a bot um, like a very visually striking bot that is not developed okay using adaptive cards, because types of visual systems that you can now create inside of a bot um, far outseed uh, what we currently say. It's not just a basic gallery that Facebook can display. It's not just full like choice architecture, like a multiple choice button type system. It's almost whatever you want to build inside of a chatbot screen, you can essentially do. Um, Input systems, dashboards, you name it. It's really cool. So I'm very bullish about what Microsoft's doing, and maybe it's a good segue to just start showing people what that may look like.
Yeah, no, let's absolutely do it. I know Tyler has been working on some cool demos in the space, so let's sort of show off some of those things and take a look what's under the hood with Composer. Um, cool.
Let's see how. Maybe you. That's. I can't share my screen. See, we've never ran into. Oh no, no, never mind. We're good. We're good. You can see it because we're using Zoom. We're smart. So let's just pull up. All
Oh,
right.
I think I don't actually think it's showing up on my screen for whatever reason.
See,
Um, let me just.
see
I don't actually.
what's it
Can
showing for
anyone
you?
I just have a black box. For anyone in the stream, does anyone else see Tyler's screen right now?
Here,
Or
I'll try to reshare it again. Let's just share Teams. Is this good?
yeah, I'm still getting a black box. I'm not sure why that might be.
Hmm.
Let me, for anyone watching the stream right now, yeah,
Oh, I do see it. I do see what you're saying.
yeah,
Because I'm watching the stream on this. That's
yeah.
interesting. It's sharing on my side. Let's see if it's showing up on my stream.
Yeah, it's looking like a black screen for everyone right now.
Dang.
Let me let me try something else. Sorry about that, guys. Par for the course, live streaming 101.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm not even getting anything anymore. Yeah,
Here.
it doesn't seem to even showing on my screen anymore with, oh, okay.
Well, I
So
just brought it back. I brought us back. We can't have a black screen.
cool. Yeah, we brought it back. So unfortunately, it seems like we can't show demos today, but we will certainly plan for this on our next occasion here. But what we can continue to do is sort of talk about some of the line of business applications that we've been seeing. Um, so I'll step back. That's not to say that Microsoft, you know, chatbot ecosystem doesn't have its flaws. So when we sort of look at sort of the grand scheme of platforms that provide the capability to build conversational AI, I sort of see it in a couple of different categories. And Tyler, feel free to chime in here as well. First category I see are companies that got into the chatbot space really early on, right? And they built these point solutions out that solve one very, very specific, really focused use case. And, they were good at doing that. But as sort of the ecosystem has improved or evolved, moreover, the clients that they were addressing are now demanding more full features to really handle the entire life cycle of these conversational AI experiences. So those companies are sort of in a dilemma to figure out how do they continue to position themselves and provide the capabilities their clients are looking for, right? Second type of company are these traditional, I would say, customer support, live chat vendors, companies like Conversocial, Genesis, LivePerson, that have conducted considerable M&A activity to purchase companies that provide conversational AI capabilities. And in turn, they've begun to also begin to scale out their core competencies internally to really have an edge. Now, those solutions are certainly evolving, and I think there's always a certain lag it takes for companies to completely integrate and provide that sort of end-to-end capability. But a lot of these companies are certainly stepping up to the plate and really focusing their time at building out these expertises in these areas. And those platforms typically tend to lend themselves to really having an end-to-end capability, the middleware included, to make those things possible. Third type of company is a company that really had intended on building a conversational AI platform from the ground up, really understanding all the nuances from design to development, delivery, and optimization. And I think there are far fewer of these companies that can actually really support mid-market and enterprises in deploying these type of chatbots. Specifically, companies like, well, at the time, Shane Mack's company that got acquired by Conversocial, there's companies like Cognigy, there are companies like Clink. They haven't been having so much good press lately, but specifically in regards to their platform, interesting how they build it from the ground up. So I think these type of companies, I think over time will be very well positioned. And then the fourth type of company are sort of these incumbent technology um, platforms, right? So your IBMs, your Microsofts, Google, Oracle, they all have begun to deploy their version of conversational AI platforms. Some are built from the ground up and really have that full functionality of an end to end capability. Some of them are compartmentalized and you only have one capability or two capabilities, and perhaps those things are decoupled. Some of them do have the middleware built into them. Um, and the fifth way is just that companies, and I've worked with some companies in the past that are simply taking off the shelf, you know, um, recurrent neural net models, modifying them, designing their own proprietary AI pipelines. I mean, that's also a route you could take as well. Certainly, a higher degree of complexity involved with that. But larger companies, Fortune 500, Fortune 50, are certainly already doing these type of things and are scaling out internal teams to sort of really handle all sides of these things. So, that's what I sort of see in the space. How does that sort of track with some of the stuff that you're seeing, Tyler?
Yeah, totally. My perspective is a little different because I'm like a really robust developer. So I guess I come at it from like the use case perspective. Um, so a lot of like the bottom level of use cases are just like one simple solution. Like either I'm an e-commerce bot and I sell stuff. I'm a knowledge based bot and I have knowledge data. You have like low level use case that companies can specialize in developing one turn solutions or one bot solutions that like sell stuff or like give out information. Um, and then you have like a development layer above that where you have like these more complex intent type structures where they can do multiple use cases. Um, Maybe they have webhook integrations and they go out, pull data back in. So you have like maybe it's a bot that does sell stuff, but it also does follow ups. Maybe it gets like customer intent analysis, uh, stuff like that. Then even above that is like these ambient type computing solutions. I don't know if it like top. I mean, that is at the top, the ambient type solution where you're now developing not just for one device or not just one use case. You're now developing for um, one device to communicate to other devices, route information, make informed decisions, send back information from one device to another device. Um, so yeah, I think you can fit yourself anywhere inside of what you want to do with conversational AI, whether you want one use case specialist in like, let's say you're the specialist in e-commerce, go for it. Or you can be in the middle where you're like, I want to be a knowledge base for all of birds. I am now birdbot and I now have all these integrations. I'm super educated on this one subject and I do all sorts of use cases on this one subject. So it's not just like I'm trying to do one thing. I'm now encompassing a whole industry, which I think there are a couple of companies that do that, where you can kind of just like sign up, maybe fill out a form, and like you are now inside the whole layer. But I think going back to kind of what you're saying, there's not a lot of the top level development companies where they can integrate custom solutions, or even think about like how you can send data maybe from an IoT device or integrating AI applications or stuff like that. Maybe there isn't a lot of high level companies. If they are, they do get acquired, like you're saying. Uh, what was the other one that you were saying that just recently got acquired?
I honestly can't remember the name of Shane Mack's company, but they got acquired by Conversocial. But I agree with you. I think what we don't see today is standardization in regards to like what really good platform look like. I think there's a lot of nuances between platforms, and I also agree with what you're saying is that I think when we start to think out 2, 3, 4, 5 years, this is not just about conversational AI, right? It's about how do we integrate to multi-channel, multi-experience um, solutions, and that will readily become apparent, very quickly here. And so it's a matter of like, how do we scale into those solutions? How do we integrate? And I don't think there's a lot of really good solutions today. I mean, because it's also partially the reason is that this notion of ambient computing and the way that we interact with it, namely conversational AI, which we're talking about here, is just not very well understood or standardized, right? So if we can't even really have a standardized discussion around what the concept of ambient computing means, then I think it's hard to have a standardized conversation around how do we take conversational AI and integrate it into it. And I certainly think with conversational AI, even within the subsets of just saying chatbots, voice, and multimodal,
Yeah.
we don't really have good standards either.
No,
Um,
exactly.
and I think it's, a function of many things, right? From a channel perspective, from an AI pipeline perspective, from a dialogue management perspective, CMS, middleware, testing, version control. So I think there's quite a few areas where there could be improvements that are made, but it can certainly be a challenge for brands trying to navigate the space. How do they future proof themselves? How do they prevent vendor lock in? So navigating it does take a very informed perspective, and it's going to continue to evolve, right? I think another conversation perhaps is talking about these AI pipelines for conversational AI. And definitely, if anyone's in the live stream now, would love to have you guys chime in. I know some of you guys represent large organizations and brands that have these things deployed in production, or are running pilot programs now on the back end. It would be great to hear you guys chime in too, because certainly with the AI pipelines we're seeing with conventional conversational AI that's being deployed, you know the if you're doing voice, the ASR models are pretty much commoditized at this point. I mean, unless you're building a voice model for something very, very niche. For example, let's say you're deploying a voice model for a manufacturing line and there's very specific, you know, types of language and rhetoric that you use. Sure, I think there might be a pretty good use case for that. But in comparison, if it's sort of a standardized FAQ or an industry that's very, very well understood, a lot of these different off-the-shelf ASR models work pretty good, right? Now, when we get to like the NLU, NLP layer of things, I think the standard intent entity model is good enough for a lot of applications, but at the same time, I've talked to many researchers in this space, and they often say that it might be too limiting and too simple of a way to sort of evaluate how we go about um, you know parsing out and sort of um, evaluating utterances that come in with the conventional NLU models. So I certainly think there can be improvements there, as well as how do we train and optimize those models. And then thirdly, when we look at dialogue management, for the most part, most dialogue managers today are pretty, they're pretty they very much lack any AI that's really helping to, optimize some of these dialogue problems that we're trying to address. And most of these dialogue managers are primarily rule and template based dialogue managers. So scalability can be real tough, and just organizing things is also difficult. I mean, even if you look at Google Dialogflow's dialogue manager, it can be a real task to try and organize those things in a way that is something that you can easily understand if you have just someone look at it. So I think that a lot of stuff can be pushed, if we get some advancements in dialogue management. I think Rasa is doing a decent job in this area. They've deprecated their dialogue manager to a certain extent and are using some ML models to help facilitate dialogue. And I also believe Oracle is doing some things in this space. From the last presentation I sat in on maybe last year, it looked like they were doing some cool stuff in that space as well. So I certainly think along the entire conversational AI pipeline, certainly there can be improvements. And when we look at the research side of things with transformers and BERT models and all of these things, they work great in a research setting now. But the problem is like we need like sort of just a hybridized model, right? Because we just can't put these transformer models out there in the wild. There's just not enough control. it's
For
it's
sure.
difficult to trace back how these bots generated a certain response. So I think those things are exciting in practice, but I certainly think there's a ways away, and we certainly need those hybridized approaches as well.
I agree. I'm just waiting for one of the platforms to come out with a really nice AI training type solution. So like, I know Dialogflow has the concept of history. Essentially, if you system tab, it can show you all the utterances and try to help categorize where those utterances fall inside the structure that you already laid out. Um, I think that's really helpful. As far as like when you start to receive hundreds of thousands of utterances in a day, it becomes almost unruly to manage or scale that way. So, and I know most of these platforms do have this type of history concept. Microsoft also has an utterance history type concept. But I'm waiting for that moment that when you can train all those intents with, let's say, like 200 utterances or 200 phrases, they're loaded up and that first initial model is trained. I want the capability to train a model that approves and denies future utterances that are coming in. I don't know if there's a solution. Like, I don't know if any of the platforms have that solution. I've been looking at Microsoft to see if they might have integrated something like that, but I think that is starting to lead towards that concept, like uh, like educated learning. Essentially, like you don't let it run wild, but you have it. You have rule sets for it to be trained, and that's managed by you. So you don't have to go in and manually just like approve and deny all these things. It's still set
Yeah.
based, but you now have more levers to automatically retrain your bot. And I just don't know if anyone's done that. I see that
Yeah.
Sagi
Yeah.
said that it's hard to scale with today's platform. So yeah, I definitely
Totally agree. So I have seen some um, I've seen some applications of unsupervised learning for optimization. I think Google has rolled something out with their analytics. I can never remember what the name of their analytics platform is, but they have rolled out sort of an unsupervised um, optimization for intents and utterance training. I think for certain specific use cases within customer support, I'll have to go back and take a look at where those things are at. But I certainly think I agree with you. I think a lot of this like manual supervised learning for optimization is very, very time consuming. And I think in certain cases, it actually holds back the scalability and just like the overall quality of experience for some smaller organizations that can't go out and hire, a bunch of people to just evaluate intents not firing and utterances and what are the intents also that need to be added. So I certainly agree. I think, perhaps not having a transformer model that's totally unsupervised that dictates all of the different natural language generation on the front end, but beginning to roll out some unsupervised learning just on the optimization back end for the supervised chatbots that are conventional today, I think makes quite a bit of sense. um, that being said, I think you're also sort of alluding to the fact that you know, and I've heard this as well. It's just like certain NLU models that we're building off the shelf, sometimes they trigger things even after a lot of training, still trigger incorrectly. So some solution providers are finding that they're adding a layer of post processing on the messages that come in, that they will sort of have logic on the back end that dictates what the response is before it actually hits that sort of NLU. So, and dialogue manager.
for
So
sure. Joseph recently commented about context, and I think context is heavily managed by the structure. So if you are making an intent for, let's say, ordering types of pizza, there's a ton of entities in there that like maybe you have like toppings, maybe you have like sauce and stuff like that. All of that context is managed inside that one intent. So yeah, getting to the proper context can sometimes be really complex because if you're trying to develop a bot with a lot of context that it needs to understand, you essentially need to map out all these intents and entity structures beforehand, before the bot can even really develop a context of what you're talking about. And I think that's really difficult for a lot of companies. How do you structure your intent structure? And then how do you um, make sure that the bot is understanding the right parameters that are coming through and giving the right context back to the user? Um, and what you're alluding to is that you can have this crazy, insane, really nice, robust bot, right? But a user can come in and start and like type something that you would seem that it would have no trouble figuring out what intent it should go to, but it bugs and it goes to something totally random. That does happen. And managing those types of context understanding is very hard. And I think um, having layers separated is the solution that certain companies are pursuing, and Microsoft's definitely doing that. Microsoft has a layer above called dialogue, and then once when you hit that dialogue, you hit that's when you hit intents. So you don't even get to intents or entities until you hit the dialogue layer. Um, so I know that Google necessarily doesn't have that type of concept. I think they all house all of their inside of one big main intent. You can branch it out and kind of layer your intents. I did that for many surveys, but no, you kind of need this type of hierarchical uh, dialogue slash intent strategy to really narrow down, which I think is what you're talking about.
Yeah, I totally agree with that sentiment. I think it's really twofold, to your point. On one hand, it is structuring the hierarchy of those intents and entities, because you're right, to a certain extent you may have global and local entities, right? So if you say no at one layer,
Yeah,
what does that trigger, right?
yeah,
So it might trigger a different response, unfortunately, at a different set of dialogue that you didn't intend for. And Google's methodology for dialogue flow is rather simple, in the sense that they really just use turn decay. So over a set number of turns in a conversation, so one turn in a conversation is like one new dialogue that's triggered, or a response that's driven, and their context is dictated by turn decay. So essentially, after a number of turns, that context is actually no longer retained in memory,
for
and
sure.
thus forth, that a tree of dialogue might not get triggered. um, so the other thing that Tyler was mentioning is that some companies are leveraging something called stack based dialogue. um, it's actually quite an old concept that comes from linguistic research from like the 1970s. Um, we've actually, I actually knew a company that was doing things in this area, and they actually got acquired by Apple. So I sort of anticipate, their dialogue management becoming much more robust. So essentially, stack-based dialogue management sort of works like this, right? So essentially, in many use cases in conversational AI, you sort of understand what the end objective is for any given dialogue in a conversation, right? For example, if I'm ordering pizza, I know what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get them to process a credit card transaction at the end and get the pizza delivered, right? So we sort of understand the basic parameters on the objective, right? And if that's the case, then I know that I need to fulfill a number of requirements down that dialogue, namely, what's the size of the pizza? What are the toppings of the pizza? How long, what type of crust do I want? And all these different things. So stack based dialogue management effectively means that in any part of that dialogue moving down, I could potentially interrupt it. And maybe something in the middle of the pizza ordering process, when they're about to ask me for how much sauce do I want on the pizza, I could essentially say, you know, um, how many how many Pizza Hut, promotional points do I have right now?
Yeah,
Right. So essentially what would happen is that is the current context that would be put on the top of the stack. The conversational AI will go ahead and address that, give you the information, and then it will circle you back into that actual dialogue. So we see that to a certain rudimentary capability within a lot of conventional platforms, where essentially you can have a set of entities that are captured within a dialogue, right? And it will essentially continually like circle you back until all the entity slots are filled. And it's sort of rather a rudimentary way of handling it, because it doesn't necessarily allow you to jump out of that context and ask questions in things that might be in a separate dialogue. So stack-based dialogue management is a good methodology. Now, there are other ways of thinking about things in higher degrees of complexity. But I think the best rule of thumb, the way to test this out, if you are evaluating platforms in mid-market enterprise, essentially ask them how they handle non sequiturs. As humans, it's very easy for Tyler and I to be talking about chatbots, 1 second, and then talk about, when was the last time that the Seahawks won the Super Bowl? And for us to come back to talking about chatbots is very easy. Difficult for bots. And the way that you would handle that is both, you know, structuring the hierarchy and intent entity models in conjunction with how robust the dialogue manager actually is and how it handles context. So I know I apologize, very, very long explanation, but yeah, the rule of the game is these things are still evolving. Context can work very, very well in certain use cases that are rather simple, unless the platform has, enhanced capabilities for something like stack-based dialogue management.
For sure. I mean, that's just alluding to the fact that context can be extremely complex. And if you're trying to solve solutions for a wide knowledge range, it might be very challenging in current technology standards. Like like you're saying, ordering pizza and then going talking about the Seahawks, then talking about jet skis, then going back to talking about pizza. Like unless you've programmatically structured that knowledge hierarchy, you're not even going to be able to have a response about it. So you really have to, with current technology, have to uh, understand your use cases, understand what your user's trying to do, and then develop proper responses in a nice manner where you can keep people on in the track of fulfilling not only the bot's requirements but the user's requirements. So yeah, that can be challenging.
Totally agree. And that those limitations are not to dissuade anyone from using bots. I mean, having conversational parity on par with humans is just
Yeah,
not accessible today.
that's
But
hard.
that being said, there's a lot of workflows, there's a lot of use cases that are simple enough that can be achieved with chatbots today. I mean,
Sure.
for us, we're very, very bullish on line of business, internal facing things. I mean, building FAQs is something that is very feasible today. So essentially, building FAQ bots that map against knowledge bases in organizations. Who works at an organization, mid-market enterprise company that likes their current knowledge management solution? Everyone hates them. I mean, I've been there. Tyler's been there,
Yep.
and finding a document can be a very difficult process on a company's intranet, right? Or if you've ever been in sales, trying to navigate some of these sales enablement platforms, equally difficult. So surfacing documentation via an FAQ or Q&A chatbot that can essentially parse through the knowledge base and provide relevant information very quickly and accurately is certainly a valuable use case in organizations. Similarly, we can think about things like HR requests. I can walk you down a dialogue that answers questions or provides how much PTO you have left in an organization, or even, in IT ticket desk. Can you help me reset my password? I remember working for mid-market companies, and I'm sitting on the phone for a good 20, 30 minutes, getting my IT ticket resolved for something very simple. I need to get my password reset. I need to get logged in. And that has taken quite a bit of time. And in certain organizations I'm aware of, that use case has actually been implemented for Fortune 500, very large consultancy that everyone would know the name on this live stream. They've saved tremendous amount of time, millions of dollars, just not having to address that. So I think I think use cases that are very well structured, in the sense that we sort of know the inputs and outputs and understand the overall objectives, are very feasible. Are very feasible today. So just to make that point.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's not only feasible, it's very useful to have those types of actions in a conversational way. Like if I'm trying to schedule this next meeting, this next fireside chat, and I went to my chatbot and I said, "Hey, can you schedule the next fireside chat uh, for next Wednesday at noon?" We can definitely do stuff like that conversational AI today. It's exceptionally useful. Um, and that's because we know the inputs and outputs and what the user is requiring, what the user wants to do. And I think that's what where we can probably gain the most knowledge. What are users currently doing, and what do they want to do with the system? And if we could figure out what inputs and outputs are there, we could start to automate these things. Like we're alluding to for HR, like resetting the password. Be like, hey, I need to reset my password. Conversational AI picks that up. Like, hey, user X needs password, and then it responds with, okay, what was your like past passwords? And then it has that inside of an entity knowledge base. For this user, these were past passwords. And then you type it in, you'd be like, hey, it's chocolate muffins 23. And you type enter, and it's like, okay, that is inside of the old passwords, right? And then it sends it on to the next step. Um, so when we know what the user wants to do, I think conversational AI and use cases like us as developers can do that every day. When we know what a user wants to do, uh, where conversational AI starts to struggle is when we don't, they do something we don't expect. Um, and I think that's just inherently a problem with our current architectures. Um, can't essentially respond to a knowledge sentiment that you don't have programmed, uh, unless you have this like structured, all-knowing entity that can go out and grab data. But that's just not how the systems work right now. So we're seeing like really simple use cases being adopted with great success, like the password one that you're talking about. Just gaining, like for COVID, right? Just gaining a knowledge base, like setting up a knowledge base and making it easily accessible, super useful. And it seems like everyone's doing that. So yeah, when you compare that to like our requirements or business requirements, it becomes extremely powerful. Um, yeah, and I think that's what we're starting to focus on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's where the market needs to start shifting now. But to that point, I think the other thing we haven't gotten into is conversation design, which also is a huge component to helping to inform the right use cases and not only use cases, but dialogue design and actual copywriting, how that's structured. But I will save that for another time.
Yeah,
That being said, I think we're actually over time here at the top of the hour, over the top of the hour.
yeah, a little
Um,
bit.
Really appreciated everyone chiming in today. We are disappointed on our end that we had technical difficulties again, weren't able to
Ah,
show really cool demos that we're working on here in Microsoft Teams chatbots. But we'll save that for next week. If you guys have questions, have topics we want us to cover next time, or people that we should talk to or bring on, definitely let us know. And we will definitely see you guys in the next one.
appreciate your time.
Cool. Take